How can you get more mileage out of your melodic material? This is a common problem that I see where a writer is beginning a primary song or a hymn or an arrangement, and they get the first 2 bars or maybe the first 4 bars, but they can't find anything to do in the next 4 bars or to stretch this to 16 bars. It's a challenge. It can be difficult, especially with the melody. Well, today in Dr. Doug's Daily Tips for How to Write Great LDS Church Music, we're going to look at hymn 112, Savior, Redeemer of My Soul, because there are 2 excellent examples of how to get more mileage out of your melodic material. All right, let me play this tune in case you're not familiar with this. This is not one that we sing very often. It's a beautiful text by an apostle, Elder Orson F. Whitney. So here goes. Okay, there's the first phrase. So as you can see in these red brackets, excuse me, the first phrase gets repeated. So we start with this tonic, so the first scale degree, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 5th, 6th, 7, 8, and that gets repeated exactly right here in the second time. Okay, now if we go back up here to the second half of the opening melody, we see the next bit. So let's compare those 4 bars to the next 4 bars of the second time. It's a little bit different. The second time it begins the same, it's identical. And then it has a different ending. Okay? So what I'll see often is I'll see somebody writing and they get about this much. And they're like, oh, now what? And I get it. It's a challenge. So one of the first things you can do is you can say, well, what rhythms did I use? Okay, well, I started by 3 quarter notes, and then a half note and a quarter, and then a half note and a quarter, and a dotted half. And you can repeat that. And they do exactly. 3 quarters, half quarter, dotted half. So that can be step 1, is decide on the rhythm. Step 2 would be, where do I want this to end? Where do I want this phrase to end? Do I want the phrase to feel finished, like it's a period at the end of a sentence, or even at the end of a paragraph? If you're only halfway through the piece, probably not. If you're only part of the way through the piece, you may want this to sound more like a comma. And if that's where you're at, then a comma is not a place where you would end on the tonic note, right? We started on the tonic note, but at a comma place like this one, not a good idea to pause on the tonic note. And they don't. They pause on the dominant note, on the 5th scale degree. That's more of a comma that keeps the door open so you can continue. Well, then the composer doesn't have to hardly think at all because they just write the next 4 measures exactly the same as the first 4 measures. The only difference is the chord is different underneath on this bar. And then in a similar manner, they have pretty much the same kind of rhythm in this second 4 bars. It's a little different. This gets varied slightly. And again, where is it going to end? Does it end on tonic? No, it does not. D is tonic. It ends on F sharp. So that's still kind of an open door to continue. All right, so that's our first big melodic repetition example in this hymn. The other one is smaller. It's here bracketed in blue. So, what tongue may gratitude tell? What tongue may gratitude... So just look at those notes. Da, dee, da, da, da. So it leaps up a 4th, what tongue, then steps down, and then repeats, and then steps down. And then the next 4 notes, the next blue bracket, does the same exact shape, except it starts on F sharp instead of starting on E. So F sharp, up a 4th, down, and then instead of repeating, it goes right down. So it's slightly different than the first time through, but it's another repetition. 2 bars becomes 4 bars. Now, the repetition technique is slightly different. The one up here, where we took this bit and we repeated it here, that was an exact repetition. But this one down here, where we take this bit and then we repeat it here, it's almost exact. It just starts a step higher. So when that happens, we have a term for that. We call it a sequence. Okay, so that's our second example of some simple repetition to stretch your melody, get some more mileage out of it. Then we need a last phrase so we can end the hymn, but guess what the composer does? He takes the same exact rhythms as the opening line and the same exact shape. See up here? 3/4 notes up, just like down here. Da, 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 dum. Right here. And then we leap down and we step all the way to the final tonic. Now it's over. So now providing the final tonic at the end of the phrase makes sense. But that whole phrase, that whole last phrase, comes directly from the first phrase. So really, the composer only had to write about 4 measures. And with those 4 measures, he then stretched it to these next 4 measures. Then he repeated it with a slight difference here. Then he took a little bit of it, he altered it, and turned it into this bit here in a sequence with repetition. And then he went back to the beginning and said, oh, well, I'll just take the same motive I used before, start a little higher and get to the high D, and then step all the way down to the low D so that it feels finished. That's a nice melodic mileage stretcher. Okay? And that is your tip for today. If you're stuck with your tune, if you've got a good little kernel but you're not sure what to do next, try some of these repetition techniques. Start with the rhythm. Take a look at the end of the phrase. Make sure you're gauging, ooh, is this note at the end of my phrase going to keep the door open to continue the song, or is it going to close the door and make it feel finished? Those will help you a ton, starting with those. All right, if you'd like more free tips like this, head over to latterdaymusiversity.com, where you can get my free 24-page report, The 10 Commandments of Writing Warm, Fuzzy, Testimony-Building Music. And then come back tomorrow where we look at hymn 113, Our Savior's Love. See you then.